Hello, I'm Jeff Johnston, host of the Living Undeterred podcast, and today we have another awesome guest. I'm really excited to speak with Amanda Faith. We've spoken a few times. I've only known her a short while, and of all the people I've met on social media, she is one of the fastest movers ascending up the ladder for the mental health initiative, the fentanyl poisoning awareness that we're trying to bring to the table. And she's the first guest I've ever had that's gone right from Dr. Phil to the Living Undeterred podcast. So, Amanda, thank you very much. And we'll talk about, we're going to put Dr. Phil in a box and talk about him later. But I want to thank you very much for being on the show. You have an amazing story to tell. And I stand in awe of what you've done in the amount of time that you've done. So why don't you tell my followers, my listeners, a little bit about you and about your story, and then we can navigate the next 45, 50 minutes on how we can help people.
Well, first off, thanks for having me. It's a big step in how we can help people. Um, I live in Northern California. My beautiful son Luca, he was 13 years old when he got what he thought was a Percocet from a dealer on Snapchat. Um, as it turned out, it was a counterfeit pill, and it was pure fentanyl. Um, and I knew that his story was valuable. I knew that his story could save lives. At the time, I couldn't really share it because of the investigation ongoing and, all of that. But what got me really into awareness in the way that I have, and I will continue to be, is the stigma. Um, Not long after losing Luca, about 5 months, three young men died across the street from my driveway. Um, they got together to have a party, and they thought that they were doing lines of cocaine, but it was fentanyl, and all three
Right
died.
across the street from you.
Yeah, yeah, right at the end of my driveway. I knew them from walking my dog. They had always been extremely polite and kind. And so I went on to the news article of their passing to offer my condolences because anyone who's lost a child to any sort of drug death or fentanyl poisoning understands just how traumatic it really is. Um, the stigma makes it even more so. And so I went into the article, and there were comments from my community that just broke my heart. Um, Things like one less druggie in the world. You play, you pay. Don't people know that using drugs is stupid? And the like. So I got my
That's
first
just
Facebook
amazing.
ban. I got my first
That's just
Facebook ban.
amazing.
hmm
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, it was well deserved. I haven't been banned since because I've learned how to, control my triggers. But
Yeah.
I'm a behavioral therapist, so I sat there with my triggers and had to really break down why I was so
Mm-hmm.
triggered by that, why I took it so personally. And I realized that as long as we have a stigma of, people with a substance abuse disorder or addicts or, any of the horrible things that people say,
Mm-hmm.
we're at more risk
Right.
because it becomes an us versus them kind of a situation. And we're not doing all we can to protect the people we love. If we think that just drug abusers are dying from overdose, and I put that in
Right.
quotations because that's what it's
Yeah.
called on medical paperwork. Um,
Right.
it's not an overdose, obviously, and a lot of people in the fentanyl awareness community understand that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not that they're being given too much of something; it's that they're being
Mm-hmm.
poisoned to death. Um, so I started the Faces of Fentanyl Poisoning. It was a simple compilation of videos showing slides, face after face after
Right.
face.
Right.
And the idea is that all of those faces look like somebody you know. Whether you have addicts in your life that are family, friends, people with SUD that are even your own children.
Right.
Every single one of those faces looks like a cousin, a neighbor, a
Mm-hmm.
friend, a brother,
Mm-hmm.
and that was kind of the point in sharing that. And, you know, when Luca's case was being investigated, it was investigated properly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
was immediately investigated as a homicide. His dealer from Snapchat is now being held awaiting trial for murder. And that's
That's good.
very
Yeah.
rare. It's very, very
Right.
rare. But,
Right.
and I hear from parents all the time that I'm lucky or I'm one of the
Mm-hmm.
lucky ones. And I would not say that I'm lucky. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody in this situation is lucky. But
Right.
I do have the advantage that because Luca was so young, he breaks the stigma.
Yeah.
I had detectives telling me, well, no one's going to walk into a 13-year-old's room and say, just another addict. Um,
Yeah. It certainly drew a line in the sand,
mhm.
where, okay, this now is very clear. This has to stop. We're having basically children die.
Yeah,
And, I am going on October will be 6 years since we lost Seth, which is just, you can relate. It feels like
yeah.
6 days and it feels like 600 years simultaneously.
Hmm.
It's an odd way to carry that through your life and try to explain to people, time heals all wounds.
Mm,
I don't agree with that, but it certainly helps. It certainly helps soften the blow. The kind of I like to say eloquently that the weight of my tears aren't full of sorrow and sadness and pain anymore. They're full of hope and inspiration. So I still cry. It's just a different type of crying. It's not
oh,
a torturous, gut wrenching.
I go back and forth. I go back and
Do
forth.
you?
I
Now,
have
when did Luca
people
pass away?
in August of 2020.
Yeah,
Yeah.
see, that's another thing. You're still in that raw stage. It's not been that long. And I'm not saying when you get to be 5 years like I am that it'll change. I think everybody's biochemistry is different. We're all kind of wired to deal with certain things differently. But yeah, his story is what caught my attention when I was kind of going through Facebook. Because you and I, we could spend 24 hours a day on Facebook
Hmm.
and not meet a tenth of the people out there affected by this stuff. And so you got to kind of draw the line. You got to kind of follow somebody for a while and say, well, that person kind of sounds like someone I want to meet. And you're one of the people that, and even before your appearance on Dr. Phil, I had reached out to you
Yeah.
on some comment you had made. Cause I think you and I have a lot of similar, our children both died of the same thing, but they both died in different, unique ways. Seth had a substance abuse problem.
Yeah.
He was an addict, an alcoholic, yet he, underlying was a normal American kid. He was a normal kid, just made a series of really poor choices that accumulated in his death by heroin in a seedy hotel room with a needle, which is so Hollywood stereotypical, but
Yeah.
that wasn't who he was. And so, when Luca passed away, everyone's like, okay, now wait a minute. He's 13. He hasn't even had a chance to be an addict yet. He hasn't had a
Hmm.
chance to be an alcoholic yet.
Yeah.
And he's not
Culpability,
here.
the
Right.
culpability came into play.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and that's exactly what I'm using to try to share awareness because people
Mm-hmm.
pay attention because he was only 13. People
Mm-hmm.
people see it differently because he was 13, and I like to point out that fentanyl doesn't care if someone
Yeah.
is 13 or 30 or an addict or not. Um, it's a ongoing problem because as long as we feed into the stigma, we're feeding into the machine that's keeping everybody at risk,
Mm-hmm.
at risk. And it only grows because the ideology is that their lives don't matter if they have an SUD, or substance abuse disorder.
Yeah, when I got thrust into this 5 years ago, I actually met a gentleman named Steve Grant, which you need to hook up with him on Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff. Great, great person. He lost his only two boys 20 years ago, 4 years apart, Chris and Kelly. 20 years ago when, fentanyl was, it was just in hospitals at the time used
Right.
for stage 4 cancer pain relief. It wasn't, there really was a stigma. Like Steve used to say, I didn't have Facebook chat rooms to go talk to. The only person I know with someone else dead was his brother. He didn't have a community like you and I have this. If I wanted to, I could spend so much time getting, getting validation, getting support, affirmation, hang in there, Jeff. Steve didn't have any of that. It actually was a stigma, heavier back then 20 years ago than it is today.
Big time.
It is literally the brown bag alcoholic wino, heroin addict in a seedy hotel. I mean, that's what it was 20 years ago. But I've got to know Steve. I read his book. He's raised $1 million through his foundation, the Chris and Kelly Hope Foundation. He's actually one of my state partner stops. And Chris and Kelly, they were just like Seth. They weren't any different. They died about the same age. But when I meet people like that, and I see what they've done, and then I meet like you and what you're currently doing, is just so inspirational, because at the end of the day, the Lucas, the Seths, Chris, the Kellys, these kids, like you said, I hate when I hear somebody say something about addict, and I want to get to Dr. Phil in a minute, because I think there was some really good opportunities he had. And I think he just, dropped the ball massively.
Yeah.
And even the conversation with some of the other people kind of dropped the ball. And I sat there looking back going, they're kind of talking about Seth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and someone's like, don't take it personally. It's like, screw you. How can I not take this personally?
I took it personally, and Luca
right,
didn't even have a substance abuse disorder.
And that's one of the reasons why you're, my attraction to what you're doing is different, because you don't have that vested interest to see us from a lens, from a substance abuser or an addict lens like I do. Yet I'm very compassionate to people that have lost children that didn't have an addiction. I'm not separating the two.
Yeah.
But it seems like when they look at Seth, they do separate the two. And I'm like, I understand your son or daughter was an All-American kid. And you know what? You say they never did drugs. I'm not talking about you, Amanda, but I hear a lot of people say, well, my son, this was, I got caught shoplifting in 5th grade. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I told my dad the first time I shoplifted. It wasn't.
Right.
The first time I got caught shoplifting.
And
so when parents, now 13 is different, obviously there's no way.
Yeah.
I mean, he's less than the age of first use. So I'm pretty certain he wasn't popping pills for 5 years, but there's a lot of kids that are 18, 19 are dying that their parents probably didn't realize they actually had a problem, but they're just saying, well, no, my son didn't. And he just took one Percocet and died. And I'm like, well, there's lots of things I did my parents didn't know about. And there's probably things that your kids are doing. But again, Luca's different deal. I really put him in a separate box, Amanda, because he's 13.
But that doesn't.
There aren't many alcoholics and addicts that are 13.
No. I mean, Drew Barrymore, but she recovered, and now she's a productive member of society. You know what I mean? But it doesn't matter to me. And I think more parents need to use those teachable moments, especially parents in positions like mine. Say their kid didn't ever use before. They might be 19 and never used before. Who are we to know? The kids aren't here to ask anymore.
Correct.
We can't ask them. We have to assume and go off of our own gut instincts and all of those things. But every single parent, regardless of the situation, has the ability to change the narrative and try to erase the stigma. Period. I constantly remind people, because Luca was only 13, his story has gotten a lot of traction, and I'm using it to my advantage. I'm absolutely marketing his age for kids just like Seth, and just like all of the other countless kids from parents I've met that are hurting so badly. Fentanyl is the enemy, not, and with the stigma, people don't see it.
I got to thinking, actually, you had said something like that. Maybe it was on the Dr. Phil show, but I got to thinking because, Seth died at 23, but his journey started with Adderall. Now, Percocet, Xanax, Adderall, you can kind
Yeah,
of throw those in a box. Kids buy them and steal them from their parents. But, you know, if Seth was 16 today, he may have done exactly what Luca did,
yeah,
and he may not have made it to 23 when he died. It's just fentanyl wasn't around as much in 16 in pills. It was in heroin.
yeah,
And that's what my son was using with a needle in his arm, heroin. But it wasn't in the pills. Today, you got 42% of all the pills on the market are counterfeit.
yeah.
And of those 42, they have traces of fentanyl enough to potentially kill somebody.
And it's even higher than that
I'm like, oh my gosh, that's
socioeconomically.
just,
In
pardon?
socioeconomically depressed areas, it's much higher than that.
Yeah, I just
You
like,
know,
yeah, I think, again, okay, so I want to move into this Dr. Phil moment because I do think that kind of separates you from a lot of the other people out there trying to do good. And you have, again, an opportunity to be on Dr. Phil. Wow, what a great honor to be able to do that.
absolutely.
I watched kind of the Reader's Digest version, and my heart goes out to the other families. And first of all, I thought they all did a tremendous job. I just think the producers and Dr. Phil just dropped the ball a little bit in regards to, again, we're trying to change the needle. We're trying to move the needle and change the narrative.
Mhm.
And yet I kept seeing these stigmas coming back into this conversation with 18 million viewers. And I'm like, man, Dr. Phil, we had such a great opportunity with 4 passionate parents there to tell their story. Let's use their stories to, obviously fentanyl. Let's eradicate it off the planet. But if it's not fentanyl, something else is going to come around behind it.
Mhm.
And so let's talk about the real underlying problem. Now, again, in Luca's case, it's different, but the other kids on the panel there, I know they all died in similar situations, but they weren't 13. They were
Right.
older. And maybe they were drinking occasionally in the weekends. Maybe they're not, I don't want to pass judgment there, but to me, I just got to thinking this really could have, and I know the show was focused on fentanyl, one pill kills. Great marketing campaign, by the way, by whoever came up with that. I do think that's helping.
Yeah.
I say it all the time, one pill kills.
Yeah.
But it's like, again, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just barking up the wrong tree here,
I've I've even changed the narrative from the one pill to one use because it's not just
Mm,
pills killing.
I like
One
that.
line
I like that.
kills, one shot
I like
kills,
that.
it's one use, really. Um,
I'm going to write that down. I may have to give you credit for that. I do like that. That's a lot more all encompassing,
it is. It is.
you
And
know.
that's with my stance on awareness, I have tried to be very, very inclusive
I know you
because
have.
there was a time where I upheld the stigma and even furthered it. My mother
Mm-hmm.
had a substance abuse disorder. And because of the trauma I faced growing up and in my own life and with her, I mean, it's hard to love an addict. You know,
Hmm. Yeah.
there are times that you
Yeah.
absolutely loathe them. And when it's your parent, someone that's supposed to be looking out for you, you develop a lot of biases.
Mm-hmm.
So, part of the way I'm able to address the biases is that I completely understand them because I've said most of those things myself.
Mm.
Um, so with awareness, like knowing those things and knowing those feelings actually helps. Like it helps to be able to, when people say, at least Luca wasn't an addict, say things like, well, fentanyl doesn't care if someone has a substance abuse disorder or not.
Mm-hmm.
And was this the first pill he ever took? Well, I don't know. He's not here for me
Right.
to ask, but had he been given Percocet, he would still be alive, you know,
Absolutely.
and at
Yeah.
least he wasn't an addict. Well, you know what? If he became an addict, there would still be a chance for recovery, but fentanyl took that away,
Hmm.
and those are simple ways parents can change the narrative, even if people are only paying attention to their story because their 13-year-old son died from taking one pill. The truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter. The pain is still the same.
what I've taken from your story and the Dr. Phil show was the Snapchat angle, because I've said before many times I didn't realize 80 to 90,000 drug dealers a
Yeah.
day are on Snapchat trying to lure in our children. And
Hmm.
I heard that statistic on the show, and I wrote it down, and I'm going to start repeating that on the tour
Yeah.
every time I speak. I didn't realize that, Amanda. I thought it was just random guy, drug dealers
No, no. And it's
popping in,
across,
but 80 to 90,000, and that's probably conservative.
yeah, and that's across all the platforms. So
Oh, okay.
platforms like Facebook, Instagram, those things, dealers occasionally try to use those, but they shut them down quicker than
How do
Snapchat.
they catch
So
them?
keywords, tags, the same way that
But
they
aren't now
catch
the
hate
kids now
speech
using
and
symbols in certain ways to
they are,
get past that?
they always have been, but now the symbols are being added to
Good.
the monitoring systems. So that's a huge big step. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one of the major differences between most social media platforms and Snapchat, however, and one of my major areas of contention is third-party monitoring. I'm not saying every parent in America needs to spy on their kids. What I'm
That's my next
saying
question I was going to ask
is
you.
they should have the ability to check in on what their
Right.
kids are doing when they see red flags in behaviors or any of those things. They should have the ability, and Snapchat
Especially at 11, 12, and
still,
13.
yeah, and
Yeah.
Snapchat still hasn't allowed parents to have that ability. It's not that we want to go in and check
Yeah, I
every
understand.
single thing that they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I allowed Luca to have almost complete autonomy over his life, and he
Mm-hmm.
was such an intelligent kid,
Mm-hmm.
and that I didn't fear losing him. Not to drugs, not like this. One of his favorite rappers had died from drugs. He was very anti-drug as far as I knew.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but then, it happened because kids are kids. And yeah.
So I know Luca's story quite well. Do you mind sharing a few special things about him
Mm.
that makes him unique? Yeah,
Oh
I know he's
man.
highly intelligent. I hear you talk about his intelligence
Yeah.
a few times.
Yeah. He
Um,
was intelligent. He
musically
was
inclined? Was
obstinate.
he into sports?
He was. He liked football. He liked basketball. He was
Okay.
just getting really, really good at football. So that
Okay.
was fun. I truly miss being a football mom every single day.
Yeah.
More so
Yeah.
during football season, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Um, he was just, oh my God, he was my hero. He was
Mm-hmm.
definitely one of my heroes of all my life. When he was
Still
a,
is.
absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
he's still guiding me. Um,
Yeah.
when he was born, not long after I was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So every day, like I just tried to make that day count for something, leave some sort of memory because I truly thought I would be dying.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to work really fast and hard on raising my kids to be the men that I thought the world needed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very, very evident with Luca. He was my mini me. He picked up on every single thing I put out. By the time he was 5, he threw his very first toy drive for homeless kids.
I remember you
Um,
telling me that, and I thought, what a rock star, five
yeah,
years old. I've
yeah,
never heard that before. That's amazing.
yeah. He went so above and beyond anything I could have ever expected from him in his short
Yeah.
life. And I mean, a week before he passed away, he was nagging me about going to feed the homeless. Because I used to do this thing with him. I would take spaghetti, I would make spaghetti, and we would take it and we'd put out a blanket and share dinner with the homeless in our community picnic style. Um,
Hmm.
and he really enjoyed doing that. It gave him a sense of self-worth, being in service of others, just like what we're doing. It's no different.
Yeah.
Advocacy is no different. because being in service of others and having a feeling of trying to help and make a place in the world that's inclusive and loving um,
Yeah.
is never a bad thing. And that was Luca. Those are the ways he still inspires me, and that'll never
Well,
stop.
Lucan sat there helping thousands and thousands and probably millions of people by the time you and I are off this planet. Um,
I'm an
and I don't
advocate
know.
for
I don't know
now.
what. Yeah, exactly.
you
I'll worry
know,
about tomorrow when I get there.
well,
Okay,
no,
so
it
let me
just
ask you.
if I do my job,
Yeah,
there will be no need for me.
right. You'll price yourself out of the market, as we say in
Absolutely.
the investment business.
Absolutely.
So you always have a smile on your face, even when you're in pain. I can see the smile. But has this always been who you have been? You've always been an optimistic, positive person, or did you learn to become this from what you went through with cancer and with Luca?
I started learning this at a very young age. Um,
Hmm.
because of my mom's addiction, you have to sort of learn to be a chameleon.
Right.
Um, some people call it codependency,
Yeah.
but you have to learn to, meld and mold and do all of those things. But I was always incredibly intelligent, so I would always try to figure out the why. And
Hmm.
that's how I went into behavioral therapy. That's how I've,
Mm.
done a lot of the things I've done throughout my life. I had to understand the why. And I always wanted to share my perspective of that because in so many ways, as a kid, I didn't feel like I was ever heard. Um,
Right.
so, in advocacy, specifically fentanyl poisoning, I share the defeats, I share the wins, I share those dark moments that nobody will talk about because it encourages other people to try to find one spot that they can share
Hmm.
from. And that's all it takes. If everyone in the country that had lost someone to fentanyl poisoning stood up, said no more, and shared their story, there would be no need for awareness anymore.
Right. Because even if fentanyl was out there, people wouldn't be doing it. They
No,
wouldn't even be taking Percocet. They
no,
wouldn't be taking Xanax because they would find other ways to whatever the. I know with kids, it's probably mostly just curiosity. You
absolutely,
know, they're not
absolutely.
thinking, I can't sleep at night. I have to take this or I have to study for a test. I mean, they're probably just like a little bored,
hmm
curious. And,
Luca
but
was trying to show off.
yeah.
Luca was trying to impress people. Um, one of the last thing Luca did, and the reason I know this and I can infer it, is because the last thing Luca did was record a video of himself
Mm,
um, using the
wow.
tablet that killed him.
Wow.
Um, so, peer pressure, trying to look cool. He had been bullied. I mean, there are a lot of aspects in play. So, I mean, even as far as harm reduction and stuff like that, we need to talk about bullying. We need to talk about mental health, you
Yeah.
know.
Um, I was going to ask you about some harm reduction things because it seems to be a more popular topic on my podcast. But when I kind of got thrust into this area of death and abuse and all this, I didn't realize the polarization on certain sides of topics. I mean, I
Yeah,
really didn't. It's worse than Trump and Biden at times.
it can
It's
be.
it's yeah, it can be. Now, granted, that's more on the minor incident side, but it seems like there's camps that just kind of set down and they're unwilling to make any concessions. And so people spend a lot of time, and I see this, and I know you see it too, of just kind of wasting energy on words, and I
Mhm.
know we're trying to change stigmas, and part of it is the labels that we put on people. So I'm all for that. But sometimes I think to myself, okay, 9 people have just went back and forth for 30 minutes.
About
No one's going to
SUD versus addict.
no
Yeah.
one's going to come to the middle. First of all, it's
hmm
like I'm going to convert you to be a Catholic right now. Ain't going to happen. Okay. we've kind of already made, and I'm just as guilty as this, but we kind of already made our camp,
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'm really trying to do is be really open-minded on these topics. So I bite my tongue a lot on Facebook. I like and little positive comments, but I just like, I know if I start this comment, I'll be doing it for half an hour, and then I got to send it and then go like this and then respond to everybody. And then it's like, but my son is over here. I could sit down and talk to him. I could watch a Netflix show I've been wanting to watch. I could read a book.
Mm-hmm.
So I opt to do the things that are less toxic. And even though I think I could probably win some of these, battles on social media, I've chosen for me, Amanda, to kind of just take the high road and just let people figure it out
The
themselves,
the only ones that I engage in, so I don't engage in the groups as much, but
I don't either anymore.
I do use substance abuse disorder
Mm-hmm.
and addict interchangeably. And
Okay.
the reasoning is that when you are trying to confront a bias,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you go to where that bias is and you speak from that level. You speak from that
Mm-hmm.
point and you build it up. If we start out with
Mm-hmm.
substance abuse disorder every single time, we're going to miss half of the audience. If we
Hmm.
switch out between addict, they're like, what is she going to say next?
Sure.
Um,
You get their attention.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, I mean, it's how do you eat an elephant? You do it one bite at a time. We
Mm-hmm.
can't attack every single aspect of
Mm-hmm.
fentanyl poisoning awareness as one person, and we can't do it at one time. It has to be a slow, gradual build. And then once we get enough information out there, we will be able to just bombard everyone with the appropriate terms. And that's where those conversations are meaningful, not right now. They're just
How do
not
we get
helpful.
how do we get fentanyl off the streets?
There's always going to be something. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's not about getting fentanyl off the streets. It is about making the American public aware of the effects of fentanyl, how truly dangerous it is to, talk to kids,
Mm-hmm.
educators, schools, all of those things,
Mm-hmm.
and to attack mental health. We need
Yeah.
to really, really pull out all the stops when it comes to mental health. And no, the one school counselor is not enough mental health for your son or daughter. It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to go see the high school counselor. Sorry. Um,
Well, I guess going back to changing the narrative and having these conversations, it's like I think we go back to the mental health angle and figure out why these kids are even thinking some of these. Not now they have to know, or they should know, that it's literally Russian roulette now.
yeah.
But even 10 years ago, when fentanyl wasn't in Percocet and Adderall and all these things, why were they taking these things in the first place? And I don't know. I hope on the tour I can meet a lot of clinicians, a lot of behavioral therapists, a lot of psychologists. I have guesses and opinions based on my own observations and my own life experiences. But I would think if we can get to kids at a really young age and say, hey, if you're anxious, go run,
Hmm.
go lift weights,
Listen to
go
some
work on
music,
that.
write in your
Yeah,
journal.
yeah, write
Yeah.
lyrics. I know Seth and Luca
Here are
both
some
loved music.
markers, make some art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just I think I know what I was going to say. I think, okay, now I know what I was going to say. This happens with attention deficit. It comes back to me eventually. Is, we spend a lot of time on the kids, but I think a lot of the problems are the homes.
Mhm.
And, I know Seth, I want to believe Seth grew up in a good home. I want to believe Luca did as well, but there's a lot of kids that didn't grow up in good homes
Mhm.
and with alcoholic parents and arguing and the fighting and maybe sex abuse and things that were a lot of issues that went on in that house that are just so toxic.
Yeah.
And I think if we can get as parents the word out that we need to be better parents first with ourselves, that means you quit drinking. That means you quit doing all the things that are counterproductive, that are deconstructive to your own life and your family unit. Then maybe your kid has a better opportunity with the nature element of nature versus nurture. I'm grasping at
But you
straws here
see,
because
parents do not want to hear that. You would not ever,
I know.
again, it's how do you eat an elephant? Parents never
Yeah,
ever want to hear that. So an
because I certainly,
easier,
I'm. Go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
an easier way versus telling them, oh, just be better parents. Because that's what they're going to hear. I mean, let's be real. Um, is how are you teaching your kids coping mechanisms? What are you doing to support their interests? Those kind of things. If a
Mhm.
parent becomes truly invested in their kids and teaching them coping mechanisms, finding out their interests and being involved with them, all of these
Mhm.
things, that will take away the other problems in a lot of
Mhm.
cases. Of course, not in sexual abuse and stuff like that. Those things
Right.
are much more serious, and the child
Right.
may have to be removed. Um,
Right.
Sometimes that is in the child's best interest because usually they come to someone like me, who's a behavioral therapist, that works with them
Mhm.
to teach them healthy coping mechanisms, watches their patterns, points them out to them.
Mhm.
There are a lot of really, really, really good tools. There really are. Um, it's kind of one of the reasons that I knew that Luca's story was so important because I did work with him at that level and we were extremely close. So I
Mhm.
knew that if it could happen to me, it could absolutely happen to
Happen to
anyone,
anybody.
anyone at
Yeah,
all.
and that's a true statement.
And I don't want any more moms to feel this way. It's
Yeah.
horrific. It's horrific every single day. Yeah, I have a smile
Mhm.
on my face because that's part of my coping mechanism.
Mhm.
It just is, but it's a nightmare. Losing Luca, especially to drugs. Losing a child is
Mhm.
bad. Losing a child to a drug-related death, you face a whole other set of obstacles, like the stigma. And that's one of the reasons I'm fighting so hard.
I had two moms on my podcast, Ann Moss Rogers and Leslie Wyrick, and they both their sons both committed suicide. Um, and again, just kind of out of the blue. One was a football player in college, and the other one was active in lots of extracurricular activities and stuff. And but they struggle with the same thing. And I often ask myself, and I hesitate to even bring this up because I don't even know if it's a question that needs to be asked. But I've asked myself sometimes when I'm alone, just thinking, would I would it have been harder or easier if Seth would have committed suicide? Now that's an odd question to ask, but I feel like I can ask that to myself. I would never ask you or anybody else that question. But I think to myself, the fact that, I think suicide would be so difficult as well because you just never know why, especially if they didn't leave a note. At
Well,
least I know exactly how Seth died and I know why. So there's closure there. But I think suicide adds that other element where, especially if they didn't leave a note and didn't tell anybody, and you're just like, I'll never know. I'll never know
in both
why. I just think,
and
to me,
in both instances, the parents are judged for their children's deaths.
true, true.
Absolutely. Where were the parents? What was
Yeah.
mom doing? What was dad doing? Were they
And a lot of
abused?
times,
It
a
must
lot
have
of
been
times we're
in,
doing everything possible.
yeah.
I mean, I, matter of fact, I jokingly, now that you're on Dr. Phil, when Seth was going through his stuff, I would say, Seth, I've Dr. Phil'd you, I've Oprah'd you, I've Bobby Knight, who was a basketball coach, he was a hard coach. I'm like, I Bobby Knighted you, I tough loved you. So I always would name drop Dr. Phil. Like I've tried every angle to fix you. And the problem was, I don't think I was aware of the underlying issues that he was going through. That now, in hindsight, I can look back and I can see there were some issues there that, now in reflection, and I've become more cognizant of that.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting there going, Amanda, I have guilt. It's like, no, I think what I'll do is I'll take that guilt and I'll go help the next family because that makes me feel better. He's not coming back. I can't unwind any of the choices we both made, but I have two other boys here.
Hmm.
trying to be rock star dad to them, and my mom just died. So I got my dad who's 90. I want to be a great son to him with his
Right,
days that are left.
right.
So there's lots of room for me to have gratitude and empathy and compassion still, even though my heart aches for, and then my wife, people forget about that because so much attention is to Seth, but my wife died of alcoholism
Mhm.
8 months ago. So it's like, but where do you spend all your time? I don't enjoy being sad. I don't, I
I
suck at it. I don't like it.
A lot of times I'll just go ahead and process it. So I'll write it all down. And if it's something
Mm-hmm.
that I feel like people can relate to, because I write it all down and then I work out the whys, why I'm
Mm.
feeling this way, how this impacted me, what people could do differently. And then I share it. And
Are you going to
that's
write a book?
absolutely, yeah. Maybe not
I
right
would be
now.
honored
Right
to.
now, I'm so busy with fentanyl poisoning awareness.
I asked
Um,
you the book question last time we talked. You gave me the same answer. Yes, but not right now.
yeah, there are other projects that are going on. I'm going to be making a PSA for my local community soon. I've got everything together for that. I'm working with the education system, and a number of teen organizations here to get fentanyl added to the curriculum,
Mhm.
which I was told no for the last year and a half. So that's a
What would be
really
the
big deal.
reason behind saying no?
Um, yeah, they want, proven strategies and stuff, for fentanyl
But if it
poisoning
kills you
awareness.
instantly, then what strategy is going to be any good?
Well, it's not, maybe strategy is the wrong word. They want it based on other successful education systems. So, because there are none for fentanyl, getting a new one added is always hard. Getting a new
Mm,
anything, getting a new law,
right,
getting a new anything is always, always, always hard. So,
right.
a lot of us that are working with the education system and stuff, we're doing a lot of really groundbreaking things because it hasn't been done before. And whenever something hasn't been done before, people are leery about it to begin with anyway.
Yeah, and getting into schools is difficult to do. I've
Hmm.
these moms I talk with have suicide prevention awareness, and they've struggled with getting into school because there's a lot of us out there that have
Hmm.
programs we're trying to get into schools and
Yeah.
so forth, and they're all good. I don't think anyone's better or worse than the other one. It's just schools have to do their vetting, and make sure that it's a tested type program. But you know, um, I don't know. Sometimes I get frustrated that I don't know if what we're, I can only speak for me. Sometimes I just feel like I'm not doing enough. I just don't feel like I'm doing enough. Even the tour, it's 95 days on the road, it's not roughing it. We're in a 34-foot fully loaded RV. So no sympathy. I'm asking for that, but it's like,
Hmm.
that's a big commitment financially. So far
Yeah.
it's all my money. It's a big commitment time wise. I have two pets. I have to leave back. I got to figure out what to do with them. It's like,
Hmm.
I'm walking away from a lot of other things I did. Our golf tournament fundraiser we're not doing this summer. A lot. It's a big commitment,
It is.
but I even feel like that's not enough.
Oh, the
I
first thing
mean,
I said after walking out of Dr. Phil was, I look at my partner, I'm like, what next? Now what do I do?
right.
Every day that I log into our fentanyl awareness groups and stuff like that, and I see new members, I cry and I feel like I didn't do my job.
How many people
Like,
are in your fentanyl awareness group?
I'm not even sure. I am
Now,
not
what
even
it's
sure
there's a
on
lot of them
mine.
I'm in.
There are a
Yours is
lot,
the
yeah. Mine
right.
is the faces of accidental fentanyl poisoning.
Okay,
But
because that
that's
could have been one of the
just,
early ones I joined.
yeah, that was just a place for me to, put the videos and, put awareness out there on an
So
awareness page.
members don't have to have lost a loved one, right?
No, no, it's
I think
it's a
some of these
public,
groups though they
yeah, this one's a
okay.
public page. It's not a group. But like
Okay.
in our groups and stuff, the more private things, when somebody comes for the first time, I call it coming out, to tell their kids stories.
Mhm.
So many of them are after Luca. It seems like he was almost
Mm.
at the beginning of this new surge of fentanyl. And it just, it breaks my heart because I know what this feels like. And my goal is that no more parents feel this way. So every time there's another parent feeling this way and relating to me and understanding me, I feel guilty, like I haven't been doing enough, if that makes any sense.
Mm.
I,
Makes
I
complete
mean,
sense. I live in that world. All my only
yeah,
guilt I have is I'm not doing enough,
exactly,
you know?
exactly.
Um, well, so I guess what's the next evolution for two part question? What's the next evolution for you? You mentioned some of the things you're working on, but I think as a whole for us, the parents that have lost the loved ones to these things, whether it's accidental or from um,
With an
being an addict, I
STD,
guess I'll
yeah,
just say the word.
yeah.
I can't think of another word off the top of my head. But so what's next? I mean, what do you think? What do you
For
think we should be doing
awareness,
to fix? Yeah, just to get these numbers to start going in the other direction. I ask every guest this towards the end. It's like we've had a good dialogue for 49 minutes, but it's like
for awareness,
what's next?
yeah, no, for awareness, we need to encourage others to share too. They need to know that most of us have days that we still can't even take a shower, or weeks
Hmm.
where we haven't
Oh yeah,
vacuumed our floor. My dog needs a
yeah,
bath, my sheets
yeah.
need changed. I'm no different
Tomorrow,
from
right?
anyone else. I'm
Yeah.
no different from anyone else. The only difference is I'm willing to share because the stigma doesn't affect me like it does a lot of people. It doesn't, I'm not ashamed anymore. And a lot of parents, even in advocacy, will go, "Well, I'm not ashamed." But yeah, a lot of us are. A lot of us have a deep, deep regret. I'm not going to say guilt. I'm going to say regret
Hmm.
because it's much more in line with self-care. And we need to encourage other people to grab onto that, to share their stories. Things like you having your podcast and encouraging people to share and doing the
Hmm.
tour. There's so many things we can do to encourage other people to just share, because the more we are willing to stand up, the more we're fighting the stigma of fentanyl. And honestly, for awareness, the stigma is the number one enemy of awareness. It
I fully
absolutely
agree with
is.
that.
If somebody can be dismissed as just another addict, then they can be dismissed from the public at large. And we don't want that.
Yeah.
None of us
Do
want
you
that.
see do you see this, and I have to call it an industry because I can't again think of another, this movement, mostly women, because my experience is the men that are doing it seem to be substantially outnumbered, and obviously to create a child you have to have one of
Well,
each. So
but
I just wonder where the men are in a lot of this.
there are really, really good, deep psychological reasons for this. Men are
Hmm.
generally trained from a very young age not to share their feelings, not to share their thoughts, not to be judged. All of those things. Men are both perpetuating the stigma and becoming victims of it. Because
Hmm.
as long as the men aren't sharing, we have to share harder as women. There are a lot more
Right.
female advocates because a lot of us can get past the stigma for the love of our child. But a lot of men are so damaged and the stigma is so ingrained, just like every other part of being a man. You know,
Hmm.
Psychologically, there are so many things that are so negative ingrained into men just to be able to survive or, be accepted by your peers. So, you know, our fight, there may be more women, but we're doing it for the men in our lives too,
Hmm.
because no true healing can come um, from a death of a loved one like this if we're still holding on to that stigma and perpetuating it by not talking.
That's so well said because I when I allow myself to struggle, sometimes I think about, and this will sound very sexist, but I'm going to say it, but it's like, I'm the man of the house and this happened under my watch. My wife died. My son died on my watch.
Mhm.
I asked her to marry me because I was going to take care of.
And you're the man, so you're ultimately responsible. Again, sexist, but
Yeah.
you
So
know,
here's a man crying, right?
yeah,
um, but it's like, I think to myself, I met both of them and, now they're both gone and it was on my watch. And I have an obligation to make sure for both of them that, I continue their legacy the best I can, but not at my expense. And
yeah.
so it's taken a lot of work. And, you and I both are work in progress probably for the next 70, however long we
Oh,
live,
as long as I'm
you
around.
know,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm going to be kind of a slow motion train wreck the rest of my life, but I'm
You
okay
know
with it.
what?
People,
The moment you stop working on yourself is the moment you should just pull the dirt in over yourself, anyways,
I
whether or
agree.
not you've lost a child or any of the other tragic things that we've been through.
Right. That's a
Um,
good point. That's a really good point.
People should
I've got that
always be
saying I like up
striving.
here. Purpose
Mhm.
becomes passion when it gets personal. And it doesn't say purpose becomes passion when your son dies or your wife dies. It says when it gets personal.
Mhm.
And maybe you've never had anyone die, but you had breast cancer or colon cancer or a murder in the family or something,
Vulvar
sexually
cancer.
molested. Yeah, it's like,
You know,
there's so many personal things that can give you passion. I think that's why I wanted to start this show. I was having so many conversations with people just on the phone, people calling me and,
Mhm.
they read my book and they saw me at a school or something. And I'm like, I kind of like talking to people.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for 8 hours. And if it wasn't you, I could talk to 7 people for 1 hour. It's like, I enjoy this talking as much as almost anything I do anymore.
Same.
And
Yeah.
when I'm done with you, I have like 35 minutes to get ready for the next. I'm meeting a brand new human at 4. I've
Woo!
never met him before. He's a mental health advocate on LinkedIn. I'm excited to meet him, start a new relationship. And it's like, that's kind of the beauty of the journey you and I are on, is that, we are taking 3 steps forward for every one we take back. And we have to stay net positive that way, or you and I will be joining our kids, which, I'm in no hurry at this moment. First of all, I think they're with us anyway, but, um, we'll get there eventually, right?
I was in a hurry at first, and then Luca told me to
I was
calm.
too for the first 6
He
months.
told me to calm down. He he told me to calm down. He,
He's shaking you, mom.
yeah, yeah.
So let me
I
ask you a question. Do you have really tough dreams?
sometimes,
I had one
sometimes.
last night.
Mm,
I had one last night. I haven't had one for a long time. I don't even remember it, but I remember waking up just shaking and in tears and just, and my dog sleeps in my room and he was even by the side of my bed because he's very hyper aware.
yeah.
He's a Labrador and he's just like a human. You have a dog too, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah, so you know what they're like. When you cry, they come right over to you. And
I'm
and
surprised
so
he's not up here.
Camus knew I was going through something last night. It was like 3:30 in the morning. I don't remember the dream, but I know it had something to do with, I'm pretty sure it had something to do with, the trauma I went through. But I was going to ask you, I talked to Seth all day long. I haven't had a lot of dreams about him though, which is really odd. I think I've
Haven't
had 2 or
either.
3 in 5 years.
Yeah, I haven't either. I used to have the nightmares almost every night. I would wake up and not be able to go
Mhm.
back to sleep, all
Mhm.
of the different things. So, I would wake up, not be able to go back to sleep. Um, I thought that I was going to have to take medications for it at a couple of points, but me with medications, I am a PTSD survivor. So
Mhm.
I've struggled with suicidal ideation for quite a while. And when I'm taking
Mhm.
medications, it actually makes it worse. People say, "Oh, well,
Mm.
have you tried meds?" Yes, I have. Um,
You know your limits, yeah.
I do. And so I became better able to, do my meditating at night before bed and, those
Hmm.
kind of things. So, and I get off my phone before bed.
Hmm.
That's
Great idea.
another
Yeah.
really, really big one. Spend some time away from the phone before bed, even if it's only 5 minutes or 10 minutes to start. I know we're all addicted to these things. Um,
Right.
that's the nature of society, which is why it's so
Right.
dangerous for fentanyl to be sold on places like Snapchat, because our kids just have this computer in their hand already, you know. Um,
So is it being sold on Instagram and all these other uh, sites? I guess I'm not on that many, but I saw a post the DEA put up, and there's lots of sites I've never even heard of. There's lots of
yeah,
Snapchat's equivalents I've never heard of.
there are. There are. And I mean, it's the dealers are putting it out there. They're casting a net to every single place they can possibly sell it. So, the places that it's most prevalent are, Snapchat, WhatsApp, those kind of things. It's all
Mm,
encrypted, so it's more of a private site, and they're doing
yeah.
that for a reason. They're absolutely doing that for a
Mm.
reason.
Well, we're at an hour. It was a fast hour. Enjoyed this very much. Two questions. How do people reach you? Like, what's the easiest way for people to reach you?
Probably at this point, finding me on Facebook. I'm Amanda Faith. There's only one of me. Everybody should be able to recognize the smile. Um, or, the faces of accidental fentanyl poisoning. And
Yeah, that's a good one.
if they're in any of the other fentanyl awareness groups, they'll see me pop in from time to time.
I will try to put all the contact information when I post this.
Yeah.
Last question. Last question.
Okay.
What's the one word of wisdom you would give right now to a parent that has a 8, 9, 10 year old coming up to be the next Luca and Seth, age wise at least? What's the nugget you would give them? One or two things you would give them. So they're not just going to be absolutely terrified every moment of every day, but how they can deal with this stuff.
Um, Bond with your kids, spend time with them, enjoy their interests with them, be very involved in their lives as much as you can be,
Mm-hmm.
and talk to them about the actual dangers of drugs and fentanyl use, and
Mm-hmm.
teach them coping mechanisms that don't involve substances, and don't model substance use to them as coping mechanisms.
Correct.
um, you have to live it and be it in front of them and for them to make healthy little thems.
Show them, right? Not
Hmm.
tell them.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate this very much. I think this show will be a very timely show for a lot of my followers are pretty familiar with my story, but your story, like I said, can certainly add a lot of validation to the urgency of
Yeah.
this epidemic because urgency is a key word there. It's one thing with trying to get people to quit drinking or quit doing drugs. It's another when,
Hmm.
y- you know, there's no second chance with this stuff right now.
No, I mean,
There's
they're
no,
just being
it's not a
poisoned to
video
death.
game where you buy
It's
another life.
Yeah.
It's over. And that's, people have to be aware. Kids have to, parents can tell their kids, but ultimately the kids are going to have to be hyper aware. That's why getting into schools, I think, is just such a no brainer. And we can't wait. We can't wait a month. How many kids are going to
No,
die in the next 30 days?
exactly.
You know, I mean, there's somebody's son or daughter. How many die a day in the United States of overdoses? At 165 or something?
I think it's closer to three. Yeah.
Okay, I'm way. Yeah, I need
Yeah.
to update my numbers.
I think
Three.
it's I think it's closer to 300. It's 200 something. Um,
Yeah, it's
but
just. Yeah,
at
it's
the
it's
at the
insanely.
astronomical rate that it's been growing, you know, it won't be long until every single kid out there knows a kid that's died from fentanyl poisoning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's becoming just an epidemic of astronomic proportions. And
There's
be
nothing to even compare it with.
no, and because of the stigma, nobody's talking about it. So
Yeah.
that's why I stick with, breaking the stigma is all of our responsibility. It's absolutely every
Yeah.
single one of our responsibility.
Well, we're just getting started. So you and I have we have a lot of passionate work ahead of us, but it's
Hmm.
very rewarding at the same time. And we're going to meet so many like-minded people on this adventure that I have to think that some parents and kids are their lives are gonna change, and they'll make that choices to make. I don't know, just give people one extra day, give people some hope and some inspiration. That's kind of the goal, to get people, especially the ones that are struggling with addiction issues, to get them to another day. Every sober person has
Yeah.
the day they quit. We just got to get
Hmm.
them to that day. We don't know what day it's going to be, but then we just got to have these needless, senseless murders stop immediately somehow.
Absolutely.
I don't know what the answer is, and that's the thing I'm trying to learn on these podcasts. Is um, it seems very antiquated to say just shut the border. It's like uh, they're bringing drones in. There's ports. I
Yeah.
mean, they have tunnels. It's like
And,
I just think we have to think a little bit bigger than that.
there's always going to be a fentanyl or something like a fentanyl.
Yeah.
Okay. There
Right.
always has been. Um,
Right.
I think it's more of a matter of warning people about it, showing the
Mm-hmm.
real consequences, and just having open and honest conversations like this one.
Right.
Encouraging the conversations, with the more and more people you can is an amazing, amazing feat.
Well, thank you for your advocacy. And I look forward to meeting you when we come to California. I know you're going to be working with us trying to get a state partnership
Hmm.
set up with a nonprofit that you have a relationship with. I would love to have you be our local advocate in the area. So the day that we come and speak, that have you present and talk about your story, and we can have Luca on the RV with Seth
Mm.
going around the United States, picking up other kids as we go. And, at the end of this tour, have an RV full of wonderful stories of great people that aren't here. But we can do something about it. They can't. Uh,
Yeah.
and I know I have,
Oh, but they
I will
are.
never run out of what's
But
that?
they are.
They
They
are.
are.
They are. I said that wrong, but they are. They're with us. We know that. They're all with us. I mean, it's heart-wrenching to see these posts and just the pictures and the names. It's like someone once said, Jeff, you can tell an audience that 800,000 people died from, let's say, suicide, but you put one picture up for 10 seconds. That's all you got to do. And then we could start changing things, but big numbers, people can't relate to that.
Well,
So we got to keep
and
Luca's face out there and Seth's
that's,
face out there and
yeah.
constantly. Yeah. Well, we will. But again, thank you very much. I appreciate this. And I look forward to talking soon.
All
Okay.
right. Have a good day.
Keep living undeterred. Okay.
You too.